I'm Gabrielle Smith. I'm a project coordinator at Vital Communities. I've been working there since this summer. I make my home in Essex Junction, Vermont, but I work at Vital Communities. I get over to that part of the state, regularly. So it's really exciting to see you all here and be as connected as we can be on video. I am the coordinator for the Upper Valley Teaching Place Collaborative, which is a collaboration of service providers who support educators in place-based education and outdoor education. And the organization has been around for several years, now about 3 years, and we are funded primarily through the Wellborn Ecology Fund out of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And I'm going to swing it over real quickly to my colleague Leona, and then we're going to just jump right into the agenda, and you can meet each of the presenters as they come on.
Hello, my name is Leona, and I am the Events and Communications Coordinator at Vital Communities. And we are so glad you have joined us for this webinar.
Thanks, Leona. Okay, so it's wonderful to see all of you popping into the chat. If you haven't done that yet, just put your first name, the organization or school you're with, and one reason that you're joining us today. So it's wonderful to see people chiming in about learning just maybe more as an introduction to service learning, others who want to hear what's happening in different districts around service learning and hearing what others are doing. That's one of our missions at UVTPC Upper Valley Teaching Place Collaborative, all of us in our acronyms, right, is to just help us all feel more connected to each other and to share our stories and learn with and from each other. So this is wonderful to see that popping up. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the history of the program. Rob?
Great. I think I'm unmuted now, hopefully. So I'm Rob Hansen. I am a 6th grade teacher at the Prosper Valley School, formerly the Pomfret School, and been here for quite some time. And I'm going to share with you kind of the history, a brief history of what became what we call Star Throwers, and you'll understand that title a little bit later, I think, in terms of where things are at. And for me, the story is kind of all about collaboration. It's working people's strengths, teachers and students as well, and just teaching to our passions and having kids learn to their passions as much as possible. So the setting here is about 12 years ago, sitting in kind of the coffee room of Nature's Classroom. Some of you may know that's an outdoor program, week-long intensive nature experience for kids. And I'm sitting with Patty Collins, another teacher in the district, teaching in Reading now. And a little bit of background, in terms of teaching, I also run or co-direct the Horizons Observatory, which is a small little observatory where we give star night sky programs and do a fair amount of astrophotography. Shameless advertising. This is a poster here of the Orion Nebula that we took at the observatory, and we have about 100 others that the kids have taken through the years. So astronomy, obviously, one of my strengths and passions. And I was talking with Patty Collins, who's really into microscopy and really studying the very small. And so over coffee, I say, hey, Patty, you're kind of an expert on the very small. I know a thing or two about the universe at large. Let's combine and maybe do a program together where we do cosmic scales where kids learn about the universe on those scales. And within a short time, other teachers that were at that program with us, but eventually the entire district jumped on board, really excited about it, and each offering a lot of their own skills to what became known as cosmic scales. And the short of it is that the National Park in Woodstock, Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park, the education coordinator at that time was Joan Haley. They jumped on board as well and agreed to host a week-long camp, day camp for everyone in the district, studying the very large, the very small, and human scale as well. And what we did is put cameras in the hands of all these kids. One camera was with the observatory, so they would come to the observatory. We take photographs, but also there's a session on astronomy there. The park was able to purchase a microscope that took photographs of pond water organisms, and we put cameras in the hands of kids to take human scale photographs, which was like one of the most powerful things. So I guess one of the upshots here is if you have a chance to put a camera in the hands of a, and I'm sure some of you have done that, of kids, and have them take photographs of just about anything, but obviously a focus. There's a lot of writing, science, and art that goes into that. So this program actually kind of took off and continued for several years at the national park for one full, sometimes 2 full weeks. Kids coming each day to spend a day studying those cosmic scales. Eventually, the program morphed into studying ecosystems because of the NGSS at 6th grade was focused on ecosystems. So we shifted from cosmic scales to ecosystems. And so the kids were mixed with mixed groupings of schools. So they got to know each other before moving to middle school together. So that became a focus of the program too. And each day of the week, they would move at this time into what we call the web of life, into a different ecosystem, and learn the pond ecosystem, field ecosystems, stream ecosystems, and so forth. So it's a program that kind of changed over the years. For about 6 or 7 years, cosmic scale. For 5 or 6 years, the web of life. And tying those directly into standards. Obviously, COVID came along. I think you've probably heard about that, and shut that part down. But my co-teacher, for a while I taught at Woodstock Elementary out in Necessity, and we continue to run a program through the park. But a particular interest to the park, and especially to Joan Haley, was the notion of activism, having the students kind of make decisions and be exposed to people who make changes in the world in a very general way. Nothing specific, but we did focus obviously on environmental activism within the national park in terms of the things that park has done over the year to focus on energy use, to focus on exposing people to different aspects of the national park. So the idea was to have students kind of learn about different activism, whether activists, whether they're local activists or worldwide. So they did that in the classroom. At the park, we actually took long walks in the woods and focused on noticing, with the idea that what you notice, what you infer, what you connect to, and what you wonder is what people do all over, but what people who want to make positive changes in the world must do. If they're to make changes, they need to be able to do those skills. So we practiced those skills as we took these long walks to the park. We helped the East End Park in Woodstock build benches and built trails. So there was a service learning component, big part of that, what became to be known as Star Throwers. And in that Star Thrower program, that activist program, the kids then chose a UN goal of the sustainable goals that the United Nations kind of developed. There's 17 of them. Most of them focused on things like clean water, life on land, no poverty, and did a little something themselves to make the world a better place. And that was, again, their choice. And this became, again, Star Throwers. One of the students, a brief reading from her response as they reflected, Piper wrote, "Star Throwers changed me for the better, because before Star Throwers, I never realized the world is beautiful in every way. Before, I didn't want to go outside, but now I can see that when I just step outside for a minute, I can calm down, and if I'm mad, or just sit in the woods and take in all the beauty." I love that notion of how she brought it personally into helping her deal with the stress that we all have in our daily lives. So again, kind of focusing on strengths and passions and collaboration was the idea. And that started with cosmic scales, moved into studying ecosystems, and then finally became this activism program. And I know we'll talk about kind of the terminology a bit later. Star Throwers. So we wanted to give you some background on the idea of Star Throwers, and that kind of piece has continued now to the Prosper Valley School this year. And Andy Wood and Aaron Sinkamani are going to talk about how that has happened. But I think we'll cue up a video here and kind of give you a sense as to where the notion of the term Star Throwers came from.
Thanks, Rob. So Andy Wood, also from the Prosper Valley School. I teach 5th grade this year. And Rob mentioned the programmatic shift over time to being a little bit more focused on student activism and service learning or community service. And from that, this idea of star throwers as the title came about, and it actually has nothing to do with astronomy, has nothing to do with throwing things. So it's sort of an intriguing title, and it actually comes from a Loren Eiseley short story or poem. And I think we have that queued up. Leona is going to show that, and we actually have a video of our students here after the Star Throwers program sharing the story. And I think that we can all agree as educators that storytelling for kids can be a powerful way to communicate an abstract idea and kind of help land that abstract idea in a different part of your memory or a different part of your whole being. So Leona, why don't we show that video and then I'll pick it up again from there.
Alrighty.
Once upon a time, there was a wise man who used to go to the ocean to do his writing. He had a habit of walking along the beach before he began his work. One day, as he was walking along the shore, he looked down at the beach and saw a human figure moving like a dancer. He smiled to himself and at the thought of someone dancing to the day. And so he walked faster to catch up.
As he got closer, he noticed that the figure was that of a young woman, and that what she was doing was not dancing at all. The girl was reaching down to the shore, picking up small objects and throwing them into the ocean. He came closer still and called out, "Good morning. May I ask what it is you are doing?" The young woman paused, looked up, and replied, "I am throwing starfish into the ocean."
This somewhat startled the wise man. He asked, "Why are you throwing starfish into the ocean?"
The girl replied, "The sun is up and the tide is out. If I don't throw these starfish in, they'll die."
On hearing this, the wise man said, But young lady, do you not realize that there are miles and miles of beach and starfish are along every mile? You can't possibly make a difference."
At this, the young woman bent down, picked up yet another starfish and threw it out into the ocean. As it met the water, she said, "It made a difference for that one."
I love our students. Every time I watch that, it brings a smile on my face. So I know that Aaron in a little bit will share more about why authentic learning and students being engaged in the community is so crucial and important. But I want to just take a minute to share a little bit about what Star Throwers look like this year at TPVS. Prior to the actual Star Throwers week, all of the teachers with some degree of fidelity kind of taught about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how activists in the community impact their communities. And then the actual week of Star Throwers was really 3 days for the students. And we had six projects in the community. 2 of those, or 3 of those projects rather, were at satellite sites off of our campus. So for example, kids were at a local arts center, building a classroom for a vernal pool. Other kids were at the national park working on trails or doing salamander research. Some of the kids were here at our campus and they were, working in the sugar shack or working in the greenhouse or doing some trail work. So we had our entire student body broken up into 6 groups, and the groups were mixed grade. So it gave a wonderful chance for 5th graders to get to know 6th graders, gave them a wonderful chance to be outside doing something hands-on. And over the course of that 3 days, they rotated and had an opportunity to visit all 6 sites and work on all 6 projects. I think some of the reasons this worked really well, because I should be honest, it is a lot of planning to do something like this. And I wouldn't necessarily say every school needs to jump into something as whole school as this, because it is a lot of planning. But the reason that it worked is because I think we had a lot of staff buy-in, and everyone on our staff was willing to help out or to develop one of the projects at one of the sites. And that really made it very possible for us to pull this off. I think one of the things that, just to kind of offer pros and cons, is that we didn't give students choice this time to what sites they might go to. Everybody participated in all the sites. So, I think there are pros and cons to that. What am I leaving out, Rob or Aaron? I think that gives a pretty good sense of what it looked like for the week.
Yeah, so, and through that week, again, they would go to a different station. And so very similar to the previous iterations, and have a completely, or a different experience that tied in some way to making a difference. And so that theme came back over and over again, is how do we make a positive difference in our world?
Mm-hmm. And I think as one of the 5th grade teachers, something that was nice for me, just an extra perk, was getting to kind of know the 6th graders and having the 6th graders and 5th graders get to know each other and just sort of start our, especially during COVID, it's tough to develop that social fabric in the school. And this kind of gave us a chance to do that outside. So I don't know, Aaron, I'm happy to maybe we'll take questions after on programmatically what it looked like, but if you want to jump in and just share more of the research or the importance from an administrator's perspective of service learning or student activism.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Rob. Nice job, guys. My name is Aaron Sinkimani. I am the principal of the Prosper Valley School here in Pomfret, Vermont. I think some of the things that I'll share, probably kind of preaching or sharing to the choir. I think a lot of the things that I'll share, educators are aware of. What we're trying to do is take the bits and pieces of what we know works for children and human beings and look at that through a developmental lens, and then create opportunities to meet these children where they are. So, so essentially, these are authentic opportunities for children, students to demonstrate skills. And those skills could be academic skills, but they don't necessarily need to be. So habits of mind, we have a portrait of a graduate here in our district. So it's as important for us to explore the elements of a portrait of graduate and have genuine opportunities for children to engage in what the community here, parents were also involved in the creation of that over the past few years. So in what the community believes is important that these students know and be able to do at the end of their schooling experience. And having been a part of many portrait of a graduate or mission and vision processes over 10, 12 years, one thing that I learned from participating in all of those as a teacher, a community member, a school leader, has been that never once do we put on the wall or talk about that kids need to know their math facts or, you know, these academic skills. What always comes from those processes are, we want them to be kind and persevere and problem solve and communicate, and a variety of other skills. So when we have these authentic opportunities to demonstrate skills, it's not always academic in nature. It can also be these other areas of humanity. So I think that's one piece of it that's really important. I think nature and place, we really work hard to ensure that there's a natural or place-based context for our content and skills, so that as much as we can, not isolating or kind of canning subjects, but integrating them as much as possible, and then using our place or natural environments, whether we're out and about in nature or we bring natural things outside into the building. For instance, right now in some of our display cases in this building, the music teacher in the beginning of the year spent a lot of time outside with students, gathering a variety of natural materials. The children came back and made instruments with the natural materials that they found on our property. The art teacher also spends a lot of time outside with the kids, and they are looking at natural elements, natural formations, and creating our kind of artistic representations with those things. And students, I mean, the part of our job is engagement. It's like the most important piece. So when I observe those types of opportunities, whether it's star throwers or astrophotography or instruments with natural objects, you get almost 100% engagement almost 100% of the time, and that's the ultimate goal. and it's never 100%, but it's the closest that we ever get. And for my career and experience, it's the closest that we've ever gotten. So I just think a couple of foundational pieces that are kind of underlying that, I would say, you know, in the mid 90s, there was a lot of research and work done, and some folks, educators and other people concerned, wow, there's a lot of screens, there's a lot of screen time, there's a lot of things that are capturing still students' attention. And we're starting to see some things that we have some questions about, and maybe some concerns about. And here enters Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, who are currently professors in Michigan. I think one of them is retired at this point, but they are the kind of founders of attention restoration theory. And what they theorized through the research in a variety of studies is that nature makes you better. Nature has attention restoration properties. So if you are working with children with ADHD, with that have traumatic experience, adverse childhood experience, if you are working with minority groups or folks that may not from even in urban settings, there's a lot to be said about going for a walk in a green space at the very least. And there's been studies that show just something as simple as that can replenish someone's ability to attend to a task. So there's these elements in nature that allow for that to happen. And we can talk about soft and hard fascination and what those things look like, but essentially it's like playing games or playing outside. And there's just a variety of things that their work explore. I think developmentally, it's also important to know the developmental interests and levels of your students. And one of the resources that I read many years ago that I think is still on the shelf here is David Sobel's Map Making with Children. And I see a bunch of head nods. It's been out there since 1998, but it tells us so much about how children perceive their place in space, and how as they grow and develop and mature over time, their understanding of their place in space literally expands. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Rob's work and what he spoke about earlier in his career, where we were looking at these scales of things. Well, when you have 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds in the building, we have a really good idea based on a variety of researchers and David's work with Map Making with Children as to where they believe they are in their space and how far out in their community they can conceive of. And of course, this is, we're generalizing, different kids have different experiences and schema, but in general, a 10, 11, and 12-year-old, if they're to make a map of their school or where they live or their neighborhood, is already going to accurately join streets, accurately identify where the libraries are, the parks, all of these pieces where younger children, it's kind of a one-dimensional view of home and dog and, mom, dad, and sibling. And it goes bigger. So in the spirit of kind of connecting with community and stewardship and place in nature, I think that's a really important piece for me as well, is meeting students where they are developmentally. So it was no mystery to me that some of the resources that we looked at Star Throwers were within that kind of that sphere. The art center that Andy spoke to is a mile away. The park is a mile in another direction, right? And then a couple things here on campus. So it wasn't a surprise to me that we started kind of close to home, and then over time, I imagine that will expand. But I really just think it can be simple. We want students to be activists or participate in activism. Well, the key word there is active. These kiddos want to explore, build, create, imagine, persevere, try, fail, stumble, have a group of other kids that pick them up, drag them along, encourage them. And I think when we provide those types of active opportunities in natural or place-based settings, that we also are providing authentic opportunities for students to demonstrate who they are, that some may not be comfortable demonstrating or in a classroom setting. And of course, again, the attention restoration piece is really important as well. So just thinking about the whole child, thinking about the developmental levels of the students we serve, thinking about the connections we make with community, and ultimately, it takes a village. So how do we include the village in the school experience, and how do students participate in the village from their school? So those are just a couple foundational things that I think about when I have these conversations with staff, among lots of other pieces that we could talk about. But I think essentially those are kind of the foundational pillars from my perspective. But my job in this regard is simply to provide anything I possibly can regarding resources, time, to the teachers and the students and the families in the community that want to do these things. So I see myself as kind of a conduit or a bridge to getting from where we are to where we want to go. So how can I help that happen, is how I see my role here. I happen to study this and enjoy it anyway, so that's nice, but I see my job as a school principal in this regard is to limit barriers, remove weeds and boulders, make it as easy for these educators, students, and families to access these opportunities as possible. But ultimately what we hear and what we see, I mean, Rob's, the quote from a student, I mean, that sums it up. That's a kiddo who I hear that, and I've not heard that before, Rob, so thank you for sharing that. That's a kiddo in my mind who, through their experiences, found that natural experiences are just stepping out the door, as this child put, and into nature has a level of healing. I heard that in that statement. And there's quite a bit of research that would support that, mostly qualitative, some mixed, but nonetheless exceptionally valuable. And that's why we see so many private institutions and different types of schools doing this all over the country and world. And this is a public school. So why shouldn't we be doing this in the public institution? So thanks for the airtime.
There we go. Thought I clicked it. Thank you so much. I had the pleasure of interviewing or talking with several of the students shortly after their experience, and I was impressed on so many levels with their with really the depth with which the experience impacted them. Couple of things I would add that the students talked about. One is that they had the opportunity to help each other, right? So one said, when we were building the gardens and out in the gardens, I do that with my parents at home. And so I could really help kids with lining up the wood and knowing how to do that. But when we were doing this other part, cleaning up the trails, I didn't really know. I don't spend much time out doing that. So there were other kids who really helped. So we all were helping each other, lending our talents. And I think not only does that teach team building, but it also just, it's an opportunity for a young person to be able to demonstrate that they have gifts and talents, right? And that doesn't always happen as naturally in some of our learning spaces. So I'm going to open the floor up to questions. And because we're such a small group, I think it's perfectly fine to either come on screen and ask your question. You can either raise your hand. If you're on the phone, feel free to just kind of go off mute and clear your voice. You can also pop in the chat, and there's a reaction tab. And if you click on that reaction, it's on my screen, it's all the way to the right on the bottom. You'll see a raise hand feature. So any of those options to make yourself known, but we're such a small group. I think we can just, I'm going to leave a little silence here. If you have questions for any of the presenters, or you could just make it an open-ended question that anyone could pop in and answer. Darby.
I guess my question for the presenter, I come from a much larger school. We have about 75 fifth graders alone at Berrytown. But my question to you is, what were some of the challenges that, or hurdles you seem to come across as you worked through this process? And how did you overcome some of these hurdles?
Yes, I'll start, and then others can kick in. And again, I know we are preaching to the choir, where many of you are educators and have deep experience too. So don't, if you're not a presenter, please chime in. But I know with outdoor education, my experience, obviously, as Aaron talked about, that level of engagement and connection and mental and physical health that kids get from, we all get from being in the natural world and exposed to the outdoors is important. But in terms of teaching too, there's a huge piece of safety. I mean, if you're outside with 24, 25 kids, you've got to make sure that those kids are going to get back in one piece in all directions. Or you may hear about it from lots of folks, including your own consciousness, in terms of making sure they're safe. So group size, and that means that you, again, Andy talked about, a lot of logistics and organization, making sure you have a ratio, adult student ratio, that is somewhere certainly below 10 to 1 or 11 to 1, to make sure that and that you're prepared with those things that you need, no matter how far afield, whether it's 100 yards from the school or a couple miles. And so making sure that those details are covered. Obviously, kids have different medical issues, different behavior regulation issues. Those are all types of things you've got to really think through before you get out in the middle of the woods. I have gone for years and years on the Appalachian Trail with large groups of students. And so kind of year after year, I get better at it. Luckily, over the years, everyone has stayed safe and healthy, but there are a couple times we had to get kids out off the trail and back to the school. And so we had to have opt-out areas for them to do that. But again, those types of logistics come with experience, and having someone on your team that has had that experience is important, because it's easy to, let one go that could be crucial.
Yeah, Darby, thanks for that question. I think a couple logistical things that came up, just simply busing the kids around, because we had 3 sites. Moving kids in a seamless way was something that took a little bit more thinking. And I think whenever you do a good field trip, it takes a couple sessions of planning with your host. I would consider this, a sort of a service learning field trip, because it was connected to work that happened in the classroom prior and afterwards. It wasn't just one standalone, okay, go here and work on this vernal pool, and it's not connected to anything else. So it was part of a sequence of learning experiences, and just getting, to that art center for me and planning once or twice, 3 times with our hosts, that, that takes a few hours. And I know for all 6 of us planning the different stations, that took some time. to Rob's point about the ratio, I would say that we had about 15 kids in each group, which was manageable. I think bigger than that, it would have been more challenging, especially since the 5th and 6th graders didn't know each other, or maybe in your case, 5th graders from one class don't know the 5th graders from another class. That always doesn't go perfectly. So I think there's that piece of it. And, you know, just kind of, you know, thinking through all of the details and working it through and going through with the staff a few times, you know, it takes some prep for sure.
And I would say that these are weeds and boulders in the way, not walls. So they can be moved, and don't let them stop you, because ultimately the feedback from students and parents, the community and the teachers was an unresounding yes. Like, this is what I heard. Look at these dynamics. Look at the relationships. Look at the teaching and learning opportunities. Look at the accomplishments. Look at the connections. Look at and look at that kid. Look at that child step up and be a leader, or someone who's an extrovert here. You know, actually kind of hold back a little bit and let somebody else take the lead. And I think those are the reasons why, you know, we really believe in this. I think it is as a result of very much a whole child approach to this, and ultimately it allows access to the kind of the rigor of the academics, right? So we have those opportunities, we've built those relationships, the collaboration. Those are all things that you can build upon back in the classroom when you're working on, you know, a math concept or a concept in social studies. So the same types of skills and experiences that are happening in a place-based, nature-based, authentic teaching and learning opportunity have direct impact on the actual kind of more traditional classroom experience. And those that can tie into that and leverage that tend to be really, really successful. And students that can make those connections tend to be quite successful in both settings. So I would say weeds and boulders, not walls. The concept, you know, they're going to be teachers like, well, that's dangerous. Well, then you guys need to have a conversation about risk and what's appropriate and healthy risk and what is too risky. And I think that that's perfectly healthy, and every school will come up with what that looks like for them. But once you try it, then you'll revisit that, and then that will expand. I think, Rob, I don't know if you remember this, I have this photograph and I love it so much, and we're down there by the brook, and it may have just been not even star throwers. We may have been out there in a different project, Rob, and you know, where kids are wading through the water and someone doesn't want to get wet. So well, then go climb on the log that's over there. So you have this young 6th grade girl, you know, in the summer and doesn't want to get wet, but is clamoring on barely. And, you know, I'm there, and Rob went over and kind of helped her across. And I'm just like, don't help her, Rob, she can do it. And it's those types of, she was determined to do it. And she was going to figure out any way she could within her comfort zone to make that happen, even if it meant taking a risk of falling or splashing and getting wet. And we were there to say, yeah, you can do it, and we're gonna let you do that. So, yeah.
A quick add-on to that: the best writing I've gotten over the years has come from these types of experiences. Many of them outdoors, some of them not. Darby was a student teacher of mine long ago, and shout out to Darby for doing play and art activities, and the kids wrote about that. The focus was on the Odyssey, just amazing. And those types of deep experiences give you the grist for doing the things that we do in the classroom that are, quite honestly, often for all of us in some level kind of artificial. And so those real authentic experiences, as I know many of you know, create, you know, kids that are never writers all of a sudden have something amazing to write about, whether it's the natural world or someone falling in the brook. It's very powerful.
That's a great segue, Rob, to opening this conversation up. Still, if you have questions for the presenters about the program itself, but also to share some of what you're doing in your schools. We would love to hear about it, and certainly I'm sure others on the call would too. So if you have something that that you want to share in the area of service learning and authentic learning, please feel free to share your stories here too. So just opening it up to questions and sharing your stories too.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Craven. I work for Granite United Way, and I'm not an educator, but we I'm working closely with my son's 7th grade teacher at the Upper Valley Waldorf School to really start. We're taking sort of baby steps into a service learning program. We're kind of inventing it as we go along. But with 7th graders, they're a little bit older, so they can sort of challenge some more like challenging topics. So we're doing projects, but then we're also incorporating that with guest speakers coming in from different nonprofits in the community. So for example, we had a speaker come in from the Upper Valley Haven to talk about what do they do. Basically, I asked the speakers to say, what do you do? Why do you personally do it? And why does it matter to this group of students? And it really took a different angle on the kind of work that it wasn't their standard, wow, this is what we do and this is how many people we serve. It was more really more authentic, more sort of organic. So we heard from the Haven, we heard from Willing Hands, we heard from Visions for Creative Housing Solutions, which is down in Enfield. And then as COVID permits, we're going to get the kids out doing projects at those places so they can sort of see, how that organization is helping the community. So it's slow going, and we're going to continue it next year as they go into 8th grade as well.
Thanks, Elizabeth. It's always great to hear schools who are interacting with the community. And I love, Aaron, when you were talking about how students have that sort of actual geographic, physical, like concept of what is around them, and helping to orient students in those ways, right? As they developmentally get to those points is part of what can happen through service learning and getting students out of the classroom and into the community. And not every child has that same opportunity in the natural course of their home life. So it is, I think it's a powerful thing for students to orient themselves physically, right, to where they live and where they are and how they're moving through their community. Does anyone have any questions or stories, experiences?
I was going to say, I don't want to take too much airtime, but I can tell you at Barry Town, we have started bringing eco into Barry Town. For those of you who are not familiar, Barry Town is a pre-K through 8 school. We have about 850 students pre-K through 8. Eco is educating children outdoors, and we're working with the North Branch Nature Center, which is in Montpelier. And the school really kind of has committed to training teachers to work on that outdoor education piece. We have programs in pre-K, kindergarten, 1st grade, and we also have it in 6th grade. So we're kind of working on bringing it through the other grades. I myself have some background in outdoor education. I did that before I started teaching. And worked with Rob as my mentor many moons ago. But I also did some eco training last year. So this is kind of as my brain works and how are we going to do this and what's the next step and looking ahead to how this can work. And Rob, I really appreciate your comment about ratios because that's one of my biggest concerns. Because like I said, we have 75 kids in the 5th grade and how do we do this? So I really appreciate that comment. So that's what's happening in Barry Town. Thank you.
Darby, just a thought would be, just a little bit, one teacher, one small group of kids go out, have the experience, come back and gush all about it. And then other folks will get in line and say, how did you do it? And how can I be involved? Whether that's something like this or any other innovation in our business, I think you got to start small and share the joy and the beauty of the experience and capture what kids say and what kids are doing and share that out. And then others will want to join as well. So I would just encourage you that eventually you could get to the 75 kids all at once doing something, even if that's appropriate. That may not achieve what your goals are. Maybe it will always be smaller groups doing things, and that's also okay. I think the ultimate goal is really being clear about what it is you want students to know and be able to do, and then working backwards and starting small is absolutely okay. Where we are small, we're 92 kids right now across 2 grades. The design of the school as far as those 10, 11, 12-year-olds was intentional. So you know, we're kind of blessed to have this little experiment that we currently have, but the reality is it's not like that everywhere. But there are bits and pieces that you absolutely can do one little thing at a time that will be contagious. If that's even a word I should be using these days, I don't know. But that will spread. So yeah, it's also, I think, interesting to follow students as they go through their high school and beyond experience, because they will come back and tell you what worked and what didn't work and what they remember. And almost every time it's I didn't remember, you know, I remembered an experience that I had, good or bad, and I remember how someone made me feel good or bad. It's experience and feelings, good or bad, it doesn't matter. Someone picked on me or someone brought me higher. Those are the things that kids remember. When I ask teachers what they remember at school, those are the things that I hear, an experience or a feeling or emotion, good or bad. So really being in tune with that when you prepare and plan, like what's the experience going to be like? I think, I don't know, I'm learning just like everybody else.
And we have walked all the students the first week of school, the entire school walked to the crest of our hill, the Ridge Line, which is a pretty tough walk. That was 5-6, but we had done that in the past with K6 as well. And again, just an amazing experience for all the, and you have to have strategies behind that in terms of grouping the kids and so forth. But they came back from that, even those that were reluctant to walk through the water came back, and that was something that stuck with them. So you can do it with large groups if you're strategic.
Thanks, Ron. Rudy, did you have a question or a comment?
More comment. I hugely appreciate this presentation. This has been quite inspiring and helpful to just think about where we are at this point in time and in the world we're walking through. I am a watershed scientist with a White River Partnership, and being an educator outside of the schools, things really changed the last couple of years. And we reached a nice milestone this past year in our 25th year of existence of having planted roughly 100,000 trees. And I suspect that more than half of those have been planted by students over the years. And it has always been a huge part of our program to do plantings with school groups. And it has been one of the joys for me to run into some of these kids years down the road, and they say, oh, I remember planting at, and I go by there now, and David Sobel's map expanded for many of them. But things have really changed these last couple of years, and our planning window for these plantings is often more than a year out. And with the uncertainties of COVID and what we could and couldn't be doing, we've ended up planting a lot of trees with contracted crews, and a lot of our funding sources, we've never charged landowners for plantings. We've always gotten funding sources that provide the trees and then planted with kids and other volunteers. And that's important to us, but it's really shifted, and I find that our program is kind of reaching a fork in the road. And so one of the things that I've really been looking at on a small scale is working with schools to propagate plants. We're looking at wetland cuttings in particular. We can never get enough conservation nursery stock. It's a real gap. So I just want to put a word out of thanks to all of you for continuing to think creatively, because I feel like this stuff just keeps evolving and keeps changing. And, you know, I think part of the gift of inspiring kids like this is they think outside the box as well, and know that, you know, like you said, it's the weeds and the boulders. These aren't walls. So thank you.
That's beautiful, Rudy. Thank you so much. And thank you for the important work that you're doing. It's true. Those are I mean, tree planting in particular, I think, is just this wonderful way for a person to really witness their impact, you know, and have a touch point in place to come back to, right? To see that impact they had. So we have just a few more minutes, and we did share an opportunity, I wouldn't call it homework, but an opportunity for y'all to do a little reading in advance and thinking about those three kind of distinct and yet overlapping definitions, right? Service learning, community service, and student activism. And just wanted to open it up and see if anyone, presenters included, any of you have any reflections on those distinctions and how you see that sort of coming to life in the work that you're doing in your schools or in your organizations.
So just for me, and just hearing that right away, and just one quick comment in that regard is I want to see those three seemingly separate things as modern citizenship.
Mm.
I don't want to see them as separate things. I believe that's what I want from my citizens, right? From my students, that there's really no difference between those things, that this is kind of who we are and how we operate and what we believe and how we work together, that whether it's service learning or community, whatever, they're more similar than they are different. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, I just often think about this concept of who we want, who do you want to be when you grow up, or how do you want to be when you grow up? And I think of those three seemingly separate things, and I would just kind of push back on that concept wherever it comes from and say, what if they weren't so separate? What if they were more intentionally aligned? Is that the type of citizen that I'm hearing Rudy say? There's been changes. We need to evolve. How do we do that? And is that a way to do it, by combining some of these things and saying, like, that is stewardship, or those are characteristics of strong citizens now in 2022, where when we engage with the community, we're really looking to serve or to problem solve or collaborate or partner. So just something that just dawned on me, Gabrielle, when you said that. Thinking about the future, my future, who's going to take care of me, my kids, and how do I want them to be, more than who I want them to, so anyway, just this concept. The other concept is of success, but for another time.
Yeah, and those three things really did align themselves by design in the Star Throwers program, right? And those students took that away. I was really, Andy, I think, was there with me when I was talking with the students outside, and they got on this idea of, like, for them, they're learning. They said it's like a train, Gabrielle. Think of it this way. It's like as we all are doing these little things, the UN sustainability goals are so big, and we could really feel like, what difference can we make, right? What difference can I make at 11-year-old and in Vermont? But they said, what if all of us 11-year-olds all over the world were all doing something? That would be huge, right? And that connection in so many ways, right? That connection between me to other people, to the world, to something as abstract as the UN sustainability goals, but they brought it to make it real. And I think those three things were really intentionally aligned in the program. Andy, did you have a comment too?
Yeah, I think that they all have merit and all can serve a function. And I think ultimately we would want the students or citizens to be activists. I think the thing that makes the activism piece unique is that there's an element of self-starting, as just opposed to being told what to do or having somebody else organize you. So I kind of see the community service and the service learning as sort of scaffolding for where we would want the students to get to. Because I know we've all had this experience where kids say, I want to save the rainforest. And to do that, I'm going to open this store. And at the end of this week, I'm going to open this store, and they have no idea. It's wonderful, and they speak from the heart, but they have no idea how many small pieces go into that big idea that they have. And I feel like that the service learning opportunities can be scaffolding, with an educator kind of helping them learn the steps to get to that result. And then eventually, when they're maybe 6th grade or 7th grade or high school or hopefully college or after college, they've experienced it enough time that they have a sense of those steps and then they can do it themselves.
That's great, Andy. So in the minute or two we have left, are there any final questions for the presenters? Great. So I would love if we could just take our last couple of minutes and just go around, just for ease of, since we're not physically in the same space, I'll just say your name and just share something that you're taking away today, something you might bring back to your school or back to your organization, something you learned. It could be a big or small thing, or just a word that you're kind of walking away with feeling after this time together. So I'm going to throw it over to Darby first. Yeah.
Oh no. Well, the last thing that I've been taking some notes over here, because there's so much that I want to take back with me, so much I want to remember to take back. I really want to look up these UN sustainability goals. Mm-hmm. And I love what you just said, Andy, about this whole idea of scaffolding. There is a project-based learning unit that some colleagues and I started last year on kids as change makers, but it's around an argument writing unit and trying to get kids to buy in. And I want to go find those, and I want to see how I can start to scaffold and integrate that kind of idea. So that's where I am right now. There's so much in my brain, but that's where my brain is right this second.
That's great, Darby. Thanks. Elizabeth.
I was really excited. So I can't remember who said it, but talking about authentic opportunities and authentic experiences. I love that. And it's something that I can use, as we engage youth in the community in volunteer products, but really also adults too. And I think just a lot of the language that folks have been using in this conversation is going to really help me in sharing and talking about the work that we do. So that was really helpful.
That's great, Elizabeth. And I love Leslie's initiative. Popping it in the chat is fine too. You can also pop in the chat if you just want to pass, or just let me know. Not me. Rudy, would you like to share something?
Sure. I guess I'll just say another thank you for the inspiration and, the idea that it does take a village, and that, these kind of opportunities strengthen those connections between the students and the community and all the different parts of it. And I know it probably dates me, but the whole idea of think globally and act locally has probably been around a long time at this point, but it's still, I think, very pertinent in this day and age. And I think these kind of projects are just, a powerful example of ways that can happen concretely. So thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. Hannah.
I was sort of wearing my non-Vince hat actually for some of this, and inspired by Elizabeth's stories about how she's working so closely with her child's class. And I thought, yeah, I want to do that for he's now 4, but he's in school, and just sort of that ability, to freedom to be a mom and not always like wear my Vince hat when I go to school, but just be mom and bring my passion to my kids' class.
That's beautiful. So if anyone off screen, I'm assuming I'm just going to keep that as a signal that you're not going to speak, and that's lovely. So
sorry, Gabrielle, just one thing. My takeaway is I just appreciate the diversity of the group. I was anticipating, teachers and educators, but we have that and others, and I just think that that's really empowering and wonderful to see different folks in different businesses and different areas that are interested in this concept or these talking points. And Rudy, I hear a problem practice from you, and I'm wondering if our students can help in some way. So it'd be nice to connect if that's something that you're interested in doing, and exploring more about the problem of practice that you've described, and if there's any way that our school or our students or our community can help, or our campus can provide something for you, or we can provide something for your cause. I think it'd be interesting to explore together. So I put my email and number in the chat for anybody to reach out and connect, and I'm happy to find the time to do that. So thanks.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you to Andy, and thank you to Rob for your time today, and for all of you for joining us. We're just 2 minutes over, so I'm going to wrap the call up. It has been recorded, so feel free to share the link if you have